A spaceship named the Excursion makes its way to the planet Mars to collect material that can be brought back to Earth. The lead astronaut, Patrick Ross, happily announces a successful landing, and his teammates, Dennis Gamble and Ann Sampas, celebrate with him. Patrick makes a dedicated speech as he sets foot on the planet, and plants the US flag while Team NASA records and broadcasts the events on live TV. Now the research team from Earth instructs Patrick on how to extract soil from Mars by using one of their fancy devices, and he proceeds to move ahead with the instructions, but there seems to be some odd steam that he doesn't notice. An old man named Herman Cromwell screams in fear as he watches this on television, and declares that he had warned everyone against it. Back to the spaceship, Patrick and his crew are congratulated for their achievements by the president, but they don't notice that one of their packages has thawed out and opened to let some alien goo escape from it. A tense build-up follows as the alien goo makes its way to the crew and eventually attacks them. Suddenly, the excursion ship stops responding for 7 minutes, and everyone at NASA panics. But then Patrick reawakens along with the others and reassures his counterparts that everything is under control. With everything set in place, the astronauts make their way back to their home planet. Now we are introduced to the human-alien hybrid named Eve, who is actually a clone of Sil, having been created for experimental purposes to equip the humans against other aliens. There we meet Dr. Laura Baker, who's in charge of the experiment and is controlling the lab and is assessing Eve. She gives a demonstration in front of Colonel Carter Burgess to show off how they can combat the aliens using a toxic agent. Eve is tortured for a bit and brought forward for display, but heals rapidly and makes Carter very impatient. As Laura apologizes to Eve for mistreating her, she expresses her frustration with the fact that she cannot meet men, and is kept in a cage. However, Laura argues that this is for the betterment of humanity. Now the astronauts give their blood samples and are assessed to be in fine health, but are told to refrain from intimate contact for 10 days, much to Dennis and Ann's disappointment. There's a party later on where Patrick's father, Senator Judson, commemorates his son's latest achievements. However, Patrick isn't present at the ceremony, as he's busy getting some action with a date. Senator Judson waits for Patrick impatiently, and then he finally makes his way through to give a commendable speech. Later that night, Patrick goes on and has some fun with a couple of women, while Eve is tested for her pulse rate. Unfortunately, Patrick transforms into a monster, and this ends up killing both the women, and they give birth to his alien babies. Strangely enough, the activity causes a spike in Eve's heart rate, as she seems to be connected to Patrick somehow. Patrick doesn't remember any of this the next day, and he goes to his dad for help, but Judson rebukes his lifestyle and tells Patrick to control his desires so that he can become president one day. Meanwhile, Dr. Orinsky makes a shocking discovery about Patrick's blood and calls the mental ward to talk to Herman so that he can discuss his findings. However, the flask containing Patrick's blood falls down, and it transforms into an alien monster that kills Orinsky before he can alert anyone else. Laura analyzes the scene of the crime and realizes that the DNA on Orinsky is similar to Eve's, but it isn't a perfect match. Realizing that there's another alien on the loose, Burgess and the generals decide to contact Preston Lennox for help. He's interrupted in the middle of a business presentation, and Burgess asks Lennox to assist him as he was the one who killed Sil. Lennox refuses the mission as he does not want to risk his life again. However, he eventually gives in when he's offered $1 million, tax-free. Nice. Now Burgess takes Lennox to Laura's lab, where he sees Eve for the first time, but Laura angrily shoos the men away because she doesn't want Eve to interact with a man. Laura and Lennox have an argument considering they've broken up for a while, but Burgess doesn't have any time for their drama. So he tells them to work together as it's a direct order from the Pentagon. The duo does some research and they connect Orinsky to Herman after checking his call records. They then go on to meet him immediately and he reveals his theory where he believes that Mars was invaded by an alien species over 1 billion years ago. He states that the aliens had left their trail behind, thus polluting the entire planet with their DNA. That's when Lennox and Laura figured that the astronauts might have brought the alien gene back to Earth. With a brief argument with Burgess, Lennox and Laura decide to test Ross for any similarities to the blood on Orinsky. However, they're unable to find him at his house as he's broken his quarantine and is with another woman at her place. Meanwhile, Anne gets with her husband, but her alien DNA erupts in the middle of their lovemaking and kills the husband, after which Anne also dies from blood loss. The team arrives and handles the alien offspring, but it's too late for them to save the other victims. Now they summon all their resources and go looking for Dennis, who's about to get himself some action too. Luckily, they stop him before anything can happen, and he demands to know what's going on when the soldiers forcefully take him away. Begess and Lennox ask him to wait for the blood results to come back, and then they ask him what happened during the 7-minute blackout at the excursion. Dennis doesn't seem to remember anything, and then he's told that Anne is dead. At this very moment, Laura calls Lennox to say that Anne's blood is not a match. Luckily for Dennis, he's shown to be clean, so the team figure that Patrick is the man behind this. The next day, Patrick wakes up next to his dead lover and a new child. So he loses his mind and shoots himself with a shotgun just as Dennis comes to check in on him. However, he regenerates his head and is now completely taken over by the alien, much to Dennis's shock. He rushes back to tell the others about what he just saw, and then they get him briefed on everything that's happened so far. Laura worries that Patrick is going to start reproducing, and that all his children will become mature within a couple of weeks. Her fears turn out to be true, as Patrick continues to sleep with professional women to build up the alien population. Eve continues to experience the same convulsions every time he gets intimate, and it worries Laura's team. Patrick goes through an alarming number of women, and we see how many children he's accumulated as well. With their options running out, the generals force Eve to undergo nuclear radiation to form a telepathic link with Patrick, even though Laura warns them of the dangers associated with it. Eve decides to volunteer, as she wants to help out, and then she goes through a painful procedure. She manages to form the connection and sees through Patrick's eyes as he sets out to find another victim. Lennox and Dennis are alerted of this, and they try to find him as he proceeds to have his way with an innocent woman he meets in a grocery store. Unfortunately, they take too much time in locating the alien villain as he begins his assault, but then he senses Eve's presence and identifies her as a fellow alien. Now he looks back through her eyes and detects her location, so he leaves the woman alone because he wants to mate with Eve now. Patrick comes up with a plan and surrenders to Lennox and Dennis so that he can be brought closer to her. When they reach the lab, it causes Eve's estrogen levels to peak and she begs Laura to let her out as she bangs on the door. Patrick detects her presence and rushes towards her after knocking out the guards. The two aliens finally meet and begin to bond, so Laura tries to stop Patrick, but he doesn't listen and is about to kill her. Luckily, Lennox and Dennis arrive to chase him away before anything bad can happen. Meanwhile, Begess speaks with Senator Judson regarding Patrick, but he refuses to give his son to the military. Later, Laura discovers that Dennis wasn't infected by the alien because he has a disease, and this could be the answer to confront Patrick. Later, Judson meets Patrick and tries to bond with his son. However, Patrick is far too gone now, so the alien awakens to kill his father in a brutal moment. Back at the lab, Laura asks Eve to help her track Patrick once again, but she refuses to do so. Meanwhile, Patrick's children start forming into cocoons to begin their metamorphosis procedures. Dennis and Lennox engage in some banter as Laura prepares a countermeasure virus spray for Patrick. However, Eve has had enough, so she makes her escape after crashing through the glass door and knocking out the guards. She is shot down by the security outside the lab, but she regenerates quickly and drives towards Patrick. Lennox and the others chase after her and alert the authorities about it as well. After some time, Eve reaches Patrick's cabin and finds all the children in cocoons as she makes her way to him. The team also arrives soon after and decides to kill all the babies around them by using the disease spray. Eve and Patrick finally meet and begin their mating as they transform into their alien avatars. Meanwhile, Laura and Dennis kill all the offspring with their spray, and then they join Lennox as he finds the aliens. Lennox fires at Patrick, but his monster form is too threatening for the humans, so Laura asks Eve for help. Eve suddenly realizes the threat and tries to fight Patrick, but he's too strong, and eventually kills her in a gruesome scene. Laura weeps in sadness and uses her disease spray to counter Patrick. Dennis thinks fast and tells Lennox to attack Patrick using a spike soaked with his blood. After a suspenseful sequence, Patrick finally dies for good. The military arrives to take away Eve's dead body, while Dennis finally gets the female attention he's been craving for so long. However, We see that Eve was impregnated during the mating process. She gives birth to the perfect alien. And that's the end of the movie. Like, share, and subscribe if you want us to cover the rest of the franchise, and hit that bell button icon to get notified whenever we upload a video. Thanks for now, and we'll see you next time.